Welcome to another episode of Prairie Wheeler. Today we're going to discuss trail communications. In particular, I'm going to talk about CBs. There are many others that people use and that I use myself, such as FRS, GMRS, and ham radio frequencies. In a couple other episodes, I'm going to talk about my personal setup for FRS and GMRS, and also my ham setup, which also takes into account some packet relay stuff for tracking. So stay tuned for those episodes coming up. But for now, we're going to talk about CBs today and trail communications. So I'm going to show you guys today what I've done for my CB install and what I would change if I was to do it again, or how I might change it in the near future. So when I did my CB install, I decided that I wanted to use a full-size CB. I went with the Cobra 29 LX model. I'll show it here for you in a minute, and I'll also show you where I mounted my mic. So inside my Jeep here, you can take a look, and you will see here's where I set up my microphone, so it's nice and handy. I can just grab it and talk, and you can see down here my radio is mounted. So you know what I mean, I can access my radio, I can turn it on, I can flip through channels. So I went with a mount here on the side because it was not too invasive and it worked for me. I'm going to show you, I went with a standard tailgate installation. This is very typical, a lot of people mount it. I went to go use a standard tailgate mount that most people use, and it didn't work with mine. I ended up having to cut and bend my own bracket. So I'm going to take you to the back of the Jeep, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. All right, so heading back towards the tailgate of my Jeep, I'm going to show you the mount that I made. If you take a look up in here, you can see the mount right here. So it's just a flat stock of aluminum that I made a 90-degree bend in and drilled a hole to put a CB mount in here. I'm just using a standard fire stick with an adjustable tip on it. I'll show you that here in a moment, what that looks like. But one thing to make sure that you remember when you're doing your CB install is that you have a good ground plane. And basically all that means is you want to make sure that your battery ground and your chassis ground on your vehicle is attached to the ground on your antenna. So I'll show you what I did over here. I'm gonna move around, and what I've done, if you look in here, there's a ground right here on my bracket. I know it's a little hard to see, but this wire here with this ground ties into a bolt on the frame behind in here where the subwoofer is. So that enables me to have a really good ground between my tailgate and the frame of the Jeep, so that way you get good reflections. So the antenna that I decided to use on my CB install is just a typical fire stick that you'll see. This one's got an adjustable tip. It's got a nut, so that way once you adjust it, you can lock in place, it doesn't move, and it's got this nice little rubber cap on it to protect it. So these are fairly decent. They're made out of fiberglass. They bend a little bit. I don't know if you can kind of see here, but they got a little bit of a bend and flex to them. So if they get caught on a tree branch, you know what I mean, they'll kind of fling and they'll spring back and then come back. Okay, so I'm going to talk about things I would do differently. If I was to do it differently again, the one thing that I would for sure change is my antenna install. I probably would mount the antenna for my CB in a similar fashion to that you can see my ham radio antenna up here set up. So this is using a mount that I got from Alberta Radio. They're fairly inexpensive. It uses an NMO mount. The antenna's thread off. They just twist off like this, right? And then they kind of twist back on. And the reason why I would go with this setup compared to the tailgate setup is that I find that my coax wears out every 1 to 2 years from the door opening and closing. It eventually causes a short or a break in the coax, and then my radio doesn't work properly. And with this type style mount, basically the coax feeds up underneath the hood here, and then through the firewall, there's a grommet that you can do. So that's probably the style I would do, and I would probably mount it on the passenger side exactly the same as you see as this. All right, now I'm going to talk a little bit about antenna tuning. When you're tuning your antenna, basically what you're doing is you're lengthening or shortening the length of the antenna to tune it to your frequency or the channel that you wish to transmit on. So when you're tuning it, most people use what's called an SWR meter. It's an analog meter with the needle dial on it that kind of moves. And normally, you know what I mean, if you get somewhere in like an SWR 1.5 or anything under 2, you're pretty decent and it's pretty good. Now that method's pretty good, but there's another method that you can tune antennas with, and it used to be very, very costly to purchase the device I'm going to show you and talk to you about. But in recent, say last 2 years, there's been some open source software and hardware that's been developed in order to make the device I'm going to show you here in a few minutes. And I'm going to show you how I tune my antenna very cheap. And when I mean cheap, sub $100 to buy. And that device is basically a vector network analyzer. And the name of it is called a nano VNA. All right, so I'm back out at the Jeep and I've brought my nano VNA, which is a vector network analyzer, out here with my laptop. And I'm going to show you and demonstrate how you can use this vector network analyzer to tune your antenna. So first I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of a rundown of what the vector network analyzer is doing when you're attempting to get the SWR ratio. And basically what it does is it sweeps a range of frequencies that you set up in it. And what it does is it injects that signal down your transmission line, which in this case is the coax, which would normally connect into your radio. So you connect the network analyzer to the coax that's inside your Jeep that's normally connected to the back of your radio, and it pushes a signal down that coax to the antenna. And then what it does is it monitors the power being reflected back down into the transmitter. And the device, knowing the transmit power and the power that it's receiving back that's being reflected, it can give you your SWR meter. And the really nice thing about it is it graphs it. So I'm going to show you what these graphs look like. And I'm going to do that by screen recording a piece of software that you can download for free called the Nano VNA Saver. Okay, so here we go. Here is what your vector network analyzer, the Nano VNA, looks like. It's very tiny, as you can see, and that's why it's kind of nice to display things on a computer. So I'm just going to turn it on here. So here it's firing up. And you can see there's this tiny little graph on it. And it is definitely usable, and I don't have any problems with it, but a lot of people love to use it on a computer. So bear with me one moment, and I'm just going to connect up my coax, and I'll be right back. Okay, I've got my antenna hooked up, and I'll show you here. So I disconnected it from the back of my radio, and my coax is connected to channel 0 of my VNA. And as you can kind of see here in the background, I've got some software running. I'm going to do a screen record here for you. So basically, when you take a look, you'll see the SWR. Currently, the way I have it set up without tuning my antenna, and this is in my garage, so this is also not ideal. Normally, you want to be like in an open field or out somewhere else. But my current antenna is saying that I'm got a 1.286 SWR at 27 megahertz, which is in the CB band. All right, so that's kind of my little tutorial on what I do. So, you know what I mean? Basically, if you want to change the frequency it's at, right? So if you want to go down in frequency within the channel bandwidth of the CB, you need to lengthen the antenna. And if you want to go higher in frequency, you basically shorten the antenna. So you either, screw the screw in to shorten it, or screw it out to lengthen it. I hope that helps everybody. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to post them up, and I'll try and answer them the best I can. As well, stay tuned. Next, for communications, I'm probably going to go through a popular choice that people use for FRS and GMRS, and followed by that, I'm going to get into some ham radio communications that I have set up in my Jeep, and some packet radio as well.